Well, hello everyone, and welcome to part two of our four-part series on finding bad data. I'm Libby Ziemilis, and I'll be your super admin for each of these trainings. First, a few housekeeping items. This training is being recorded, and the recording, along with a more detailed slide deck, will be available on the Hands-on Connect Zendesk following each training. For those of you here today, you'll also find the slide deck in the handout section of this GoToWebinar. Each training will start out the same way and will briefly discuss topics in the training prior for context. To be respectful of everyone's time, these trainings will not exceed 20 minutes. While I absolutely welcome questions in the chat window, these will be addressed by my fellow Hands-on Connect team members, and I will not be answering them during each presentation. You can also feel free to open a Zendesk ticket or join us in lab to chat about your questions. Also, keep in mind that each training builds on the one prior, and your questions may be answered at a later training. The goal of this series is to get you thinking about your data one piece at a time. There will be a couple times during my presentations where I'm going to ask you to participate in a poll, and it may require you to be logged into your system for an accurate response. So if you're able, please go ahead and do that now so you can be ready when the time comes. All right, last week we talked about three different types of data: good data, excess data, and bad data. And then we focused on different ways that the bad data can present itself in your system. There's duplicate records, where you can have identical or nearly identical records. Inconsistent records, where you might have data that's entered into your system in different ways, like state abbreviations. There's gibberish data, like random information that's just entered into a field because it's required. You might have excess data, which has exaggerated information, where maybe an extra digit entered into a field turns 20 hours of service into 200, or a missing digit turns a $1,000 donation into $100. Orphan data can affect the way your system works as a whole, where you might have volunteer opportunities or contact records with no organization, or occurrences without volunteer opportunities. All of these types of bad data are cause for you to want to make a data management plan. So this is where we talk about, in general, the process that we're going through in this series. The key takeaway that I want you to have from these first few trainings of the series, and this training in particular, is that data management is serious stuff. It takes time and deliberation. There's a method to this madness, and although you may start to find bad data in your system, and even during today's training, but before you go start deleting records, take a deep breath and stick with me for a couple more weeks. Today, we're going to focus on finding bad data, but next week, we're going to look at making a data management plan. Salesforce is an incredible system for managing data, and on top of that, you have Hands-on Connect, which is a fantastic tool for your volunteer management needs. However, knowing how your system works as a whole is imperative when making a data cleanup plan, and without that, you could have unintended consequences from your actions. We at Hands-on Connect are here to help you, but we can't work magic if you end up deleting important records. Now, we're going to get started digging into finding that bad data. There are two main ways to see data in your system, more than one record at a time. That's reports and list views. Reports are a list of records that meet the criteria you define. It's displayed in Salesforce in rows and columns, and this data can be filtered, grouped, or displayed in a chart. Every report is stored in a folder. Folders can be public, hidden, or shared, and can be set to read only or read write. You control who has access to the contents of the folder based on rules, permissions, public groups, and license types. You can make a folder available to your entire organization or make it private so only the owner has access. Reports are based on your report type. So type selection is the most important step in creating any report. It defines what fields and records you will see in your final report. The other way to view information is in a list view. List views allow you to see specific sets of contexts, opportunities, documents, or other object records based on the criteria you set. List views allow you to define your view based on the primary object that you're interested in viewing. So it would be a view of contexts, or organizations, or volunteer opportunities, but none of these combined. Views can also be restricted to only the creator or shared through your organization, similar to those of reports. So first, we're going to take some time to look at reports that will help you expose some of that bad data. Since reports are so powerful, it's really important to consider what you want to know before you create or look for a report. Last time, we looked at how much data you have in your system. Did any of that really surprise you? Do you want to consider taking a look at any of those objects which had a lot of records and you weren't expecting that? Well, that's a good way to get started thinking about your data. But before we create any new report, did you know that you already have some reports in your system specifically looking for missing important data? We're going to go ahead and start there and see what we can find. Oh, whoops, wrong button. Okay. I am logged into the demo site for Hands-On Connect, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at the reports in the system. So when you click on the Reports tab, you'll see that on the left-hand side, there's a search here. This search searches for the name of the folders. The search that's a little bit over here in this main section is for searching on reports. So let's type in here, looking for a report is missing. And if you're able to do this, I would love for you to do this along with me because I'm going to ask you something about this first report that we're going to look at in a poll question. So this first report that we're going to look at is the missing information for volunteer opportunities. Now, the first thing that you want to ask yourself anytime you open up any report and you're evaluating data is to ask yourself, what am I looking at? How do I know what this is? How do I know if this is bad? And how do I know if this impacts my system? Well, when we're looking at this report, this top section, it shows the filter criteria for this report. And all of these are looking for blanks in required fields. You have this where it says one or. So any of these can be left blank. We're going to scroll down and these are the results. Now, when you're looking at this report in your system, you may see some self-reported volunteer opportunities. These are a special case on our OK in your system, so I'm not going to address these today. Today, we're looking for data that you have control over to ensure the consistency and completeness of the data in your system. So looking at a few of these first two, we can notice that these are both missing the maximum attendance. And then this third one is missing both the start and end dates. Since this data is missing, we know these opportunities are not being able to be used on the public site. If you have a problem making some of these type of opportunities active, you can always use this report to take a look and see at a glance what's going on in your system. So I am going to go ahead and launch the poll because I'm curious to know how many orphaned records do you have in this missing information volunteer opportunity report. I'm going to give you have 30 seconds. So hopefully you can hear my music. If not, that's okay. It helps me with the timer. And then we'll just kind of see what it looks like for you guys. For us, since I can't take the poll, it looks like we have 29. So that's actually a lot better than I thought was going to be in our system. So just about 5 more seconds. All right, awesome. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone who submitted this. And I want to take a look here. So of the people who voted in this poll, we've got a quarter of you that have more than 100 around here. Oh, I don't need that anymore. Okay. And, so that's not too bad. So it's just important for us to kind of take a look at these reports and know what do we do what do we do with that once we've done that? The next report that I want to take a look at is the missing information for occurrences. Now, the reason I wanted to take a look at this report is because if you look for any of these occurrences that are missing this volunteer opportunity, it implies that these occurrences were created, whether they were imported or created through the system, but then the volunteer opportunity was deleted. Um, These are now orphaned occurrences. It's important to remember that when deleting data, there's a right and a wrong way to do it. By doing it incorrectly, this system now has orphaned occurrences, and so we can't use these occurrences anymore. So we can see that we have, there's quite a few in this system that need to get cleaned up. Okay. I have one more report that I want to look at for finding some bad data, and that is going to be the registration answers for contacts. This is going to give me a good idea of how many gibberish responses I have in my system related to these questions. So as you can see when I scroll through here, there is plenty of fine data. Also plenty of inconsistent data, but I can at least know that Y is yes and N is no. FD, that's not going to help me. But also a response like FGHG, FGHGH is not going to help me in any way, shape, or form. I'm not able to interpret that as an answer. So this is just useless information that's taking up space in my system. And when I run reports on it, it kind of muddies up the good data that I'm trying to learn. I'm going to quickly actually swoop down to the bottom because I want to take a look at a question that is set up in a way that makes it so it's going to be consistent. So this question here is about where have you volunteered previously? So this one, we can tell that it is a check. Someone can select their answers because we can see how consistent and accurate this data is. We're going to believe this information. We're going to know that we can say, okay, of our volunteers that have responded to this question, 60% of them have volunteered at a school. Whereas it's going to take a lot more time if we're looking at one of these open-ended questions that says, well, we have to evaluate each one of these records and be like, well, why not? I think that that means yes. Sure, why not? That one is more of a stronger yes. And then we have some one. I might say that's a yes instead of a 0, which would be a no. I'm more of a follower than a leader. So, I mean, this is information that's not necessarily useful for this specifically, but it's data. So it just makes it a little trickier to deal with, but that is definitely some gibberish data. Now I want to take a look at a list view. So what I'm curious about is I'm going to go to the Connections tab, and I want to look for connections who have an excessive amount of volunteer hours served. For this example, I'm going to look for connections with more than 50 hours. I've already created a view that's called Lots of Hours, so I'm going to click on Go. Now, whenever you are looking at results from a report or a list view where you're trying to get some information from what you're looking at, we're going to have to do some evaluating to find out which of this data is important to us and what we know we would need to change. For example, like this 50.2 hours could be and is probably valid, but would someone really have volunteered nearly 7,000 hours in a year? So that would break down to nearly 20 hours a day, every day for an entire year. So that is probably wrong. Here we would also look at this one and we would see here this volunteer had a declined status with a start and end date that's blank, but they still managed over 400 hours. So this one is also probably wrong. So this data is not helpful, but when I want to report on hours served, it's going to really affect how I report this to maybe funders or our community if I'm doing an annual report. So I have, we'll move that back over there. So there's one other time when you might find some bad data, and that would be on accident. So there might be times when you're looking through your system and you see something incomplete or wrong. This is a good time to see if there are other examples of this same bad data. Take the time to create a report or a list view that looks for all the records that might have that same issue. That could be something that you would want to think about when you're looking at doing your data management plan, and you would come back to this data as something that you need to, follow up on again. I'm going to give you homework from this session. So for your homework, I'd like you to create a list view and a report. I've included some more detailed instructions on creating a report in the slide deck for your handouts for this session. I'm looking for a contact report and a contact view, because that way you could get at some of that inconsistent data as well as duplicate data. Once you have that completed, I would love for you to share with me on the Zendesk in the announcement page for this series and tell me, after looking at your already made reports and creating both a report and a list view, what kind of data are you most interested in cleaning up? I'm hoping to be able to use your responses to help guide the next two sessions so we can really get at what you are interested in learning about fixing your data in addition to just general best practices. And that brings us to next week. So next week, we're going to look at making a data management plan. Once you have an idea of the data you have in your system, it's important to spend time talking about best practices for cleaning it up and maintaining it in an organized fashion before you make any significant changes. Clean data takes time, and cleaning data takes time to do it right. So you need to be ready to make that commitment to do it right the first time. I hope you join us next week. I want to thank everyone for your time and participation. And right now, I am going to hand it over to Melissa, another member of our Hands On Connect team. Melissa?
Thank you, Libby. I always feel like, and now from your sponsor. Thank you so much, Libby, for that information. And we just want to remind you that there is information on our virtual admin pilot program. We have a couple of spots left in that if you think you need a little extra help or want to explore the possibility some more, and we're always happy to talk to you about that. Immediately following this presentation, we will have the information online so you can get your homework done and finish out your hour. And thank you again for attending next week, same bat time, same bat channel, and we'll look forward to your responses in the Zendesk. And thank you, Libby. Would you like to sign us off?
Yeah, thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day. And hopefully, you get a long weekend and you can enjoy that as well. Take care, everyone.